Blessings, beloveds. Welcome back. Anastasia, Cosmic Astrologer with you guys. Wanting to just give you guys some of my own personal reflections on everything that's happening at the moment, and I will speak about Uranus going direct as well. And I have on my screen here actually my YouTube channel page, the community section. I'd like to start with this if I can. It's just an offering of um, a world meditation prayer dedicated to the earth, to Mother Earth, and it's created by um, a number of different souls who are, they're shaman type figures, basically. Here is the post here, you can see it, and a lot of you have seen it and read it. A lot of you have responded and have expressed some very beautiful replies and comments. Here they all are here. Um, I'm just so touched every time I read one of your responses and comments, and just your beautiful empathy and compassion that you show uh, towards divine unity, which is all of us. We're all a part of that, and to the respect for the earth, this sacred land that we're all privileged to be on. And we really need to honor and respect her so much more than we have been. And I'm saying that to all of us, including myself. And it does take crisis for things to change on big scales, which is what's happening at the moment due to the Saturn-Pluto conjunction in Capricorn, which, as I've mentioned before, the last time that occurred was over 500 years ago. So, that's not a coincidence. That's not a coincidence that it's happening now. So with regards to this post, I know a lot of you have read it, and I'm showing it here on my screen. For those of you that haven't, please go and read it on the community board. But basically, it's got to do with a very spiritual part in Australia called an area called Uluru. I'll just read this comment here. Together, Uluru and Kata Jutta form the world's solar plexus chakra. This is the primary chakra for the maintenance of global health and vitality of the planet and all living things. If things are not right here, then the whole world system suffers. It is now the time for this to be healed. The healing began in October 2019 when a total ban on climbing the highly sacred site of Uluru was declared. So then it goes on further to say, according to Robert Kuhn, author of The Rainbow Serpent and the Holy Grail, this powerful activation will also involve a blast of divine light and energy through the song lines, ley lines of the planet, connecting all of Earth's main chakras together, and most especially one of the main energy arteries, song lines, referred to by the Aboriginal people as the Rainbow Serpent, representing divine feminine energy to many. The line starts at Uluru solar plexus and travels through Bali, World Purification Center, to Glastonbury, heart and third eye chakras, to Lake Titicaca, sacral chakra, and then back around through to Uluru. This is massive. This is the awareness, understanding, insight, consciousness around this, and the people gathering to basically project their light and their energy and their intentions from the purest level of their highest self in a time like this is extremely, extremely powerful and extremely necessary. And it's the alignment with all the energy of the planets in Capricorn, Saturn, Pluto, namely in Capricorn, and Uranus is a big part of this picture as well, because, and I'll just bring up the chart now of, this is just a transit chart for today. Sorry, no, it's not today. It's a couple of days away. So today is the 10th of January, down here in the Southern Hemisphere in Australia. For you guys, it's probably still the 9th. Now you can see Uranus is stationary and will also be stationary tomorrow. And then on the 12th of January, Uranus is direct. Now, this is very important timing that it's actually happening pretty much when the lunar eclipse takes place. The alignment of all these planets in Capricorn, um, the lunar eclipse being in Cancer, conjunct Hades, conjunct the North Node. Hades representing purging, purification. Lunar eclipses heighten the sensitivity of the etheric and astral realms, our own emotional body, the earth plane herself. And in the sign of Cancer, it's very sensitive energy. Obviously, I've spoken about the lunar eclipse, so I don't really want to go into that. But I just want to speak just a couple more minutes on the significance of Uranus being in Taurus whilst these catastrophic events have been taking place in Australia. I know there are other places in the world that are also experiencing different types of cataclysmic events. I acknowledge that as well. However, the fires in Australia, have been probably one of the biggest things that's been taking place right now. Just the sheer devastation, loss, grief, which is all Ceres conjunct the Saturn Pluto in Capricorn, part of this lunar eclipse that's coming up. And as I said, the date of the 13th of January is quite crucial. Also, the 23rd and 24th of January is extremely crucial because by that stage, the moon gets back. It reaches the Ceres Saturn-Pluto conjunction, and that's a very important symbolism for further things to manifest on the levels that they have. Now, even though it is beyond critical and beyond disastrous and painful, and my deepest sympathies certainly go to the frontline ground emergency services people who have just put themselves out there, day in, day out. They're exhausted. It's unspeakable, what they've been going through. We've had some services from the US fly in just today, I think it was. So we're very grateful, for all the help. And there are many of us all around the world that can't physically do anything, but the important thing about that is this meditation that's being proposed from a collective perspective on the 12th of January is extremely powerful. It's very, very powerful. It's more powerful than we probably realize. The power of unity in collective intention is actually more powerful than what appears in the dense physical 3D reality. I've seen some incredible examples. There was two, and this is on YouTube, you can find it. Two Chinese doctors in Beijing had a patient who had a tumor in her body, it was so big. It was a cancerous tumor. It was virtually as big as her body. And these guys are professional surgeons, right? But what they did was with very clear intention and visualization, they chanted right above this patient. And you can see this on YouTube, as I said, and through the chanting, which they did for hours. It wasn't just 1 minute. They did it for a long time, but they actually cleared the tumor, the deadly tumor in this patient's body. That's a very powerful example of the power of prayer, meditation, intention when it's unified. and the visualization and the clear intention. And we've got these beautiful clear intentions coming from the higher self, the heart center, and the central sun, which is the sun behind the sun, which is referenced actually in that posting that I just shared a few minutes ago. Please read it, it's worth reading. It also gives the times of different countries in the world, what time it will be for you if you're in California, in the US, if you're in China, if you're in Iran, you know, it just gives you the exact time so that everyone is, so there's a synthesis, a synchronization of everyone actually sending the clear visualization, intention, purity, love, and light all at the same time. And it's not just about Australia, it's about the whole Earth plane. It's about Mother Earth because she is in a process of ascension. And what we're seeing are the ramifications of that because she has to purge all these toxins that have been accumulated over, you know, centuries, long, long, long time. It now is the time for this to be happening, which is why it is. But unfortunately, we are experiencing it here on the 3D Earth plane through absolute cataclysmic crisis, trauma, grief and loss. It's incredibly difficult times without question, but I'd like to encourage you all to, you know, just have faith and understand that from an evolutionary and ascension perspective, this is happening as it needs to happen. And we need to align with the Earth's intentions, with Mother Earth, with Gaia. You know, she breathes, we breathe. If she stops breathing, we stop breathing. We need to get into her rhythms. We need to understand what's going on. And this cleansing and purification is just a massive part of all of that. And that's what that article is essentially referring to. It's about ascension of the earth plane and things being realigned and brought back to some kind of balance and harmony because the world is so out of balance. It's so out of balance because of the nature of the personality and ego. It's just distorted everything. So the more of us that can be awake and aware and conscious and continue on our path, the more this ascension process. Look, I mean, I can't say, you know, exactly what that's going to look like in the next 10, 20, 30 years. I think the ascension process, it's not about instant gratification. It's not instant results. It's a very large process that involves so many different levels and layers that we can't even fathom. But the parts that we can understand and that we consciously participate into, that's what we can do, and that's what we need to do. So Uranus going direct. Oh, sorry, I wanted to say also Uranus in Taurus is extremely symbolic of what's happening to the ascension of the earth plane as well, because Taurus is the archetype of the earth. It's the land. Literally, it rules and correlates to the land all over this earth plane. And Uranus, when it entered Taurus, which was not so long ago, so we've got about another 7 years to go of Uranus in Taurus. So we have quite a few changes to still endure and experience and see. And it's started off quite intensely this year because of the Saturn Pluto having their final meeting, as it were, through their final conjunction. The intensity is so extreme because of these bodies lining up the way they are. It's not a coincidence, it's not a random thing. The planet is evolving, the planets themselves are evolving, we are evolving, everything is evolving, whether we like it or not. It's just how it is. The outer planets, actually, which are referred to as higher octave planets, that is Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, they are referred to higher octave planets because they, in such a big way, they are so so far removed from our everyday consciousness, and a very powerful on an unconscious level. And in order for us to assimilate the frequency and the consciousness of these outer planets, higher octave planets, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, we this is the reason why they are retrograde for 6 months at a time. Think about it. Mercury is retrograde for about 23 days. Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto are retrograde for 6 months. That's because our psyche cannot um, cannot process that level of consciousness so quickly. So when these planets go retrograde, which Uranus has been retrograde the past 6 months, it actually helps our psyche assimilate the consciousness of Uranus, which is happening on an intuitive internal level. So the significance of these outer planets going retrograde for 6 months at a time is huge, absolutely huge. Now, Uranus in Taurus, as I said, correlates to the shock, the trauma, the uncertainty, the unpredictability, the chaos, all these things that are happening on the earth that are out of our control. And Uranus is in Taurus, which correlates to, earth, as I said, the land. So things are going to happen to the earth, to the land, literally, which they are. But if we understand that Uranus, from an evolutionary perspective, is always about evolving us, obviously, but it's about deconditioning. It's about deconditioning the old layers. That includes the Earth's ley lines, the lines around the Earth, the grid, right? Those lines too need to be purified, cleansed. And that's what from a bigger picture perspective, that's why all these things are happening. But unfortunately, we have to experience the pain and loss, shock, trauma, and suffering that goes with it. Because without those experiences, we don't become conscious. You don't become conscious by just wanting to stay in the light, imagining the light, and seeing figures of light. Now, who was that made that quote? I think it was Carl Jung. Had that very famous line: "You don't become enlightened by imagining light figures. You must face your own darkness. Darkness is within all of us, whether we like to admit it or not. The principle of light and dark exists in every single one of us, as it is here in this 3D dimension. And we just need to balance that out. It's not about getting rid of the dark, it's about balancing it out. We live in a world of duality, and things are just out of balance. So Uranus in Taurus is going to see us through the next 7 years with extreme, unpredictable uncertainty, changes, all relative to the Earth herself. And this is the absolute massive beginning of it in the last couple of months with what's been happening in Australia. And we're not at the end of it yet. Just even today, there was high alerts and warnings for people to evacuate from further towns, even towns that have already been burnt down. They've been lit again. It's just chaos. Anyway, but again, I just want to say that there is a bigger plan. There is an order in things, as much as it doesn't seem that way at the moment. And we just need to stay focused on our path, our authentic path, and stay in contact or in connection with our higher self to understand the bigger purpose and the bigger plan. Because nothing remains the same. Things have to change on every level. And we are just witnessing some of the biggest changes that will be they'll be marked in history as some of the biggest times on this earth plane. And some of us might be around to hear that. There's, babies being born today, babies being born yesterday. But I think the golden age, as it were, the fifth dimension and so forth. I don't think those things are going to feel as though they are in our actual field of experience in this 3D dimension, in the next few years necessarily. We are looking at a long sort of trajectory, a long period forward and ahead. But what we do now is so vital for what is to come. And don't forget, if you believe in reincarnation, and if you believe in evolution, then you must believe in reincarnation. We are going to come back. We will return. Those of us that have only 10, 15, 20, 30 years left, maybe perhaps 40, whatever it is, we will return. So it's not about leaving this place behind and thinking, screw it, I'm out of here. It's about being really conscious about the sacredness of this planet, because we will return, and we need to start to create a different plane of field of consciousness for those that are actually just being born now as well. So these are all the things that we need to, really be consciously aware of as we evolve on a daily basis. Now, Uranus going direct. I want to read something to you guys, which is really worth listening to. It's about Uranus and the significance of Uranus in transit, which we are all experiencing, transiting Uranus somewhere in our chart. So the first thing is, obviously, where is transiting Uranus in your birth chart? The other thing that I would encourage you to also take into account is, where did Uranus begin? As in, where was it when you were born? Where is it in your natal chart? Because wherever it is, the level of that sphere, that dimension, that house, that part of your birth chart, it carries the Uranian vibration, because Uranus is in there all the time. So as Uranus transits around your chart, it takes with it whatever the symbolism of that house is, and actually gets projected or filtered through Uranus as it transits each part of your chart, which is all about your evolution, waking up, becoming liberated, becoming allowing the becoming of your real authentic self to continue to step forth, to be born, right? To connect to that. Remember, largely we are operating at a very unconscious level. And then the other part where we are operating somewhat consciously, it's very much from the inner planets, Sun, Moon, Mercury, Mars, Venus, those personal planets. They are the forces that essentially reflect our everyday movement of everything that we do on a day-to-day basis. But, Uranus correlates to our right brain, our intuition, higher consciousness, breaking through the walls and the barriers of Saturn, of the Saturn reality. So, Uranus is what is going to help us each time, wherever it is, it's going to help us crack through, break through the dense layers in our own psyche that hold us back on any particular level. It's the body that actually deconditions the conditioned imprints in our psyche pertaining to past lives as well, not just this lifetime, and certainly this lifetime as well. And as it moves through each part of your chart, which it spends a significant amount of time, 7 years thereabouts in each part of your chart, right? Each house. So it's a long transit. In addition to that, you may be a Taurus, which means you're going to have Uranus conjunct your sun. You may be a Scorpio, you're going to have Uranus opposite your sun. You may be a Leo, Uranus will be square your sun. Aquarius, Uranus will be square your sun. If you're an earth sign, apart from Taurus, as in Capricorn or Virgo, you will have Uranus forming a trine to your sun, or moon, or Mercury, or Mars, or Venus. It's very important to pay attention to this cycle of Uranus, as it's also forming an aspect to angles in your chart, or planets in your chart, because that's part of the growth and the deconditioning and the awakening and the internal intuition and impulses being woken up as Uranus is moving around, and then also perhaps aspecting a planet in your chart and or an angle meaning the ascendant, the descendant, the IC, bottom part of the chart, MC, top part of the chart. So Uranus is going to go direct in a couple of days' time. It correlates or aligns with the lunar eclipse. We have the stellium there of Capricorn kicking things off in very, very big ways. Okay, so here's some things to consider. You know, while Uranus has been retrograde the last 6 months, and you can think about this every time Uranus goes retrograde, right? And then 6 months later, it's ready to move direct. This, what I'm about to read to you, you can think about this and apply it every time Uranus is in its retrograde movement. Okay, so here we go. For those able to respond to Uranus retrograde natally, sorry, it's the wrong page. That's natal. Let's go to transit. Okay, transiting Uranus retrograde lasts about 155 days, occurring once a year. If it is to have any personal impact at this time, it is most likely to do so according to the circumstances of the natal house it's transiting, which is what I was just saying. Okay, it's just saying some things I've already said. Okay. All right. Because most of humanity are not able to easily manage Uranian principles, its transiting effect is bound to be most immediately experienced as the disruption of the accustomed flow of affairs typical of the house it transits. Now, the reason he's saying that is because, again, it's a higher octave planet, which means it's not naturally assimilated into our psyche or our consciousness. It's predominantly unconscious within us. So in order for us to assimilate it consciously, it's a process. It takes a long time, number one. Number two, it's disruption because on a normal every day-to-day basis, we have this idea of structure, routine, order, and Uranus is not about that. It's about disrupting that because it's actually trying to shift things, change things, shift your direction, bring you into a different field of experience, decondition, let go of old paths, old ways of being, old ways of doing. And our natural default mode to that is usually resistance. And the resistance is what creates the disruption because we struggle to flow with the energy of Uranus because it's not easy. It's not. You've got to be so detached when it comes to the principle of Uranus. You've got to be detached and you've got to be able to walk into a path of uncertainty. How many people can do that? Not many. That's why the nature of Uranus, when it comes along and it swoops into your life in a significant way, it can be really chaotic. But resisting it just brings more suffering because the resistance reflects the inability to let go, which is what? It's attachment, and we all have it. And, Uranus is in Taurus, the sign of the biggest attachments ever. Taurus signifies attachment to the material plane. Taurus, in the psychological developmental model of the human being from birth, Taurus is the toddler that you see on the ground, a 2-year-old who is not speaking yet, is la, la, blah, blah, right? And is picking up every single object and sticking it in his mouth or, just touching, right? Picking up everything, wanting to It's exploring the world of the senses, right? The toddler. That's what the toddler is doing. That's what Taurus signifies. So Taurus is about, that's why it has that level of attachment. You know, it's so in touch with the body and the senses. It doesn't have any awareness of anything beyond that yet. So at a very unconscious level, Taurus is all about the physicality and the senses. That's where our Prime Minister is at. He's just completely unconscious. All he cares about is money. He's got no empathy, no insight, no compassion, no sensitivity. He's like a freaking robot. But he's Taurus at the worst level. And I said that in my previous video. And I'll say it again. And I don't care if people get pissed off either. Okay. So Uranus having been retrograde, let's get back to some comments on that. Disruption here suggests sudden alteration of personal plans due to unforeseen new conditions in the environment that throw one's original intentions off course. Matters in concern tend to lose their structure quickly and break down as situations now bring forth unexpected elements which challenge the status quo of activities. But usually this is all for the individual's benefit, soul-wise, meaning from a soul level. Uranus retrograde by transit can help put the individual in touch with needs for personal freedom of self-expression that may have been previously unrealized until this point in time. The individual is now given another opportunity to contact that highly unique part of himself that seeks more liberating forms of activity or fresh new approaches for its optimum development. This may be particularly so if Uranus should make several aspect contacts to natal planets rather than merely transiting through a house. And then he says, perhaps a higher octave planets are retrograde for so long because it is relatively harder for us to properly assimilate their special qualities without lengthy, periodic I can't even say that word. In other words, withdrawing, you know, stepping back, going into retreat, same thing. Recapitulation. There you go. There it is. Had to get it. Okay. Which is what I was saying earlier about one of the reasons, you know, why these outer planets stay retrograde for so long is because we need that time for our unconsciousness to assimilate and process our evolution in some way that makes sense as we proceed forward, consciously, that is. Okay. With Uranus turning its intuitive impulses inwardly during this retrograde transit, the individual may be better able to stumble upon new avenues of expression that could result in greater self-illumination. He may reach a level of self-truth that can jolt him from ego inertia or mundane stagnation in the area Uranus transits, which again is all about the deconditioning and expanding beyond the, you know, the little self, as I like to call it, the ego. Because in the world of the ego, it's, you know, it's very much, well, the ego gets threatened very easily. And these higher octave planets, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, they threaten the nature of the ego quite easily. Unless a person obviously has a lot of consciousness, a lot of awareness, a lot of insight, and even then it doesn't mean they're not going to experience challenges, but they have that internal insight and understanding that helps them navigate their way through these evolutionary, cataclysmic, sometimes smoother paths and changes. But for those that are extremely personality-based, like our hideous Prime Minister, who's just clueless of how to deal with this whole situation, I know from a higher level he's playing the part that he needs to play. when we take it to the absolute highest level, he's doing exactly what he needs to be doing. But, we can't help but be judgmental, be angry, be upset, and so on and so forth because of his apparent incompetence, right? We can't help react to that. But when we step back and we understand at least somewhat that there is a divine plan, a bigger picture that's playing out here that we don't have all the answers to right now, but we must continue to do our part to contribute through our own level of insight, understanding, intuition, then we can be less reactive. Someone said in one of my videos, anger is good, it creates, I can't remember exactly what the person said, but because I spoke about not in my last video, the lunar eclipse video, I think I mentioned something about, being careful about where we direct our energy and, allowing anger to kind of, to be all consumed by anger and so forth. And I still stand by that. I will say, though, that anger is better than just being paralyzed. If you're paralyzed through depression, right, and you can't motivate yourself to get out of bed, well, you're better off being angry, and actually, because anger is going to get you moving, right? It's going to have a course of action. My concern about that is, what's the course of action going to be? It has to be directed in a functional way. If it's dysfunctional, then anger is things like, sorry to say for any US fans of Trump, but it's retaliation, with acts that Trump puts forward, for instance, very unconscious actions, again, of narcissism and, egotistical position of, I'm the most powerful man in the world, so to speak. I decide I'll do whatever I want to basically do, and that's more or less his attitude anyway. So you see, anger can be, very toxic and very destructive. On the other hand, anger is better than depression if it's directed in a functional, healthy way. So that's how I would see it for the viewer that made the comment about anger. Okay, and just to finish up here, all right, where are we? So he's just making some comments here about with Uranus turning its intuitive impulses inwardly during this retrograde transit, the individual may be better able to stumble upon new avenues of expression that could result in greater self-illumination. He may reach a level of self-truth that can jolt him from ego inertia. I know I read this before, but I'll just finish it. Or mundane stagnation in the area of where Uranus transits. The impact may not be that outwardly notable, but it can be stunning upon one's subjective levels. New insights gained suggest that the individual may reform his attitudes here and never see things quite the same way again in this department of his life, meaning wherever Uranus is transiting. This is the power of Uranus, having been retrograde the last 6 months. This is what we've been working with in some kind of way. For each of us, it's different. It's a unique thing. It relates to different things in life. It relates to different parts of our own specific evolution and, level of consciousness and awareness. But these points could be applied to virtually anybody, right? Just into different lengths, different extremes, and so forth. An internal sense of rebellion, normally directed against the self, can be felt before it surfaces and is directed towards the environment. Usually, outer situations at this time seem to operate beyond the dictates of our self-will, even more so than when Uranus is direct in transit. For we are now being conditioned to attune ourselves with universal will. And this is the difference between when you're looking at the slower moving bodies, they correlate to a very personal will to some capacity. Now, Mars is the planet of will in complete definition, and Pluto is the planet of the highest will, without a doubt. but each planet has some level of will within it, right? Just in terms of how these energies operate on a day-to-day basis with just our everyday living. But when it comes to Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, those planets are aligned with the divine will. And the more we can assimilate the vibration, frequency, insight, awareness, consciousness of these three outer planets, the three octave planets, the more we can align with divine will as well, because they correlate to divine will. That's why they are so freaking powerful. I said the word freaking. I have somebody who didn't like that I used that word. I've just used it again. It was a Freudian slip. I meant to do it. I hope you're listening. Okay. So then he says that, let's see, if this energy is mismanaged, then this retrograde transit can mark a period of strange mishaps for some that can rarely be analysed or explained with any measure of success. It's a tricky energy. And if it's mismanaged, yeah, it can be just cataclysmic experiences and events that don't have a meaning. They just become, loss or heartache or devastation, but no meaning and no purpose. It's pretty hard. So just a couple more comments. Situations can defy all logic and reason, at least when strictly viewed from the surface appearance of things. Even out of the blue, opportunities are harder to account for. Uranus retrograde is prompting the individual to look below the surface of matters to discover deeper, hidden causes previously ignored, and to view such matters in the light of pure truth and objectivity. That's one thing about Uranus. It's the planet that helps us be really objective, clear, and detached. Uranus is not about emotional rushes or emotional reactions or emotional energy. It's connected to right brain consciousness, intuition, divine will, higher learning, understanding, taking us into new territory, unknown territory, so that we can grow, basically, because we just can't stay the same. Okay, and just finally, what is suddenly brought to our attention represents what we must reform to help us better integrate a past cycle left unresolved before we can be free to forge ahead into the future. And that's just relevant to it. What he's getting at there is talking about when you're looking at the cycle of Uranus transiting around your chart, as it correlates to making aspects to any of the angles in your chart or any of the personal planets particularly, you need to pay attention to that cycle, because it is that cycle within itself is going to reveal this the next step that you need to step into in terms of your own personal growth, what you're truly ready to leave behind. And things just leave whether you like it or not when it comes to Uranus and Pluto. Both those planets have the ability to literally remove people or things out of your life, and you've got no control over it whatsoever. That's just a hard truth. So we are to focus upon such matters with great clarity. Unfortunately, very few are willing to be honest and self-revealing about their lives. And so we seldom receive the benefits of mental enrichment with Uranus retrograde, with what Uranus retrograde can grant us during this period. So these are all the things that you can consider and think about of Uranus having been retrograde the last 6 months. And now as it goes forward, what has been happening in the last 6 months pertaining to the nature of Uranus, what it correlates to, which is waking you up, basically, tuning into your intuition, sharpening that, having sudden flashes of insight come into your consciousness. That's what you're, I mean, if Uranus is transiting your Mercury, for example, which I had that just a couple of years ago, it's freaking amazing, amazing on so many levels. Just the way your mind functions while Uranus is transiting your Mercury, it's actually very difficult to articulate, which is why I'm not really doing the best job right now. But I'm actually not really wanting to interpret that necessarily. I'm just using it as an example. And that's what Uranus is doing on an inward level anyway. It's waking up and creating these electric impulses internally that wake us up to our own highest will and the divine will that takes us into what's called the unknown, which is about evolving, evolution. So those are my thoughts and reflections relating to Uranus now going direct in Taurus. And it will be direct, for quite some time, because it's only retrograde for half the year, so it'll be, direct for the next 6 months or so. And I think that can be very powerful for us to be able to move forward as well with the tragedy that's actually happened. I think it would be more difficult if Uranus was retrograde the next 6 months for a lot of people to recover from what's happened. That's just the sense I get about it. Okay, guys, thank you so much for listening. And once again, thank you so much for all your beautiful messages and emails. I've had emails, messages, people interacting on the community section. Every single one of you that has these beautiful intentions with your way of sharing, your thoughts, your feelings, projecting goodness and sensitivity, empathy, compassion, all those things. Those acts of having those sorts of intentions through your heart, they don't go unnoticed by the divine will, number one. Number two, they open your own heart chakra up in much bigger ways so that you can actually be more connected to the goodness of things as well. And number three, it makes, and not in any particular order necessarily, but number three, it makes such a huge impact and difference in people's lives and on the earth plane when we operate from that level, period. So see you guys soon. Much love.